Destiny rests upon your shoulders, yet you stand unshaken. You were never just another figure. You were chosen. Forces beyond comprehension shield you, making you untouchable. They tried to tap into your energy, but one by one, they were cut off. Psychics lost their clarity, doubted their skills, and even shut down entirely. Your spiritual zone is sacred, impenetrable, yet they kept sending their best, certain they would succeed, only to fail. You remain steadfast, the last leader, protected by powers beyond this world. No force can undo what has already been written. They took a seat, lighted candles, closed their eyes, and extended their hands. But nothing was there. Not a flicker, not a murmur, not a hint of what they were looking for. They tried to break through the stillness by pushing harder, but the further they went, the worse it became. An invisible force wrapped around their consciousness, pushing, squeezing, deleting, and their eyesight became blurry and their pulse faltered. They realized something was amiss and withdrew, panting. This was different from the dark, twisted things psychics had seen. They were refused entry, not just barred. Not only were you safe, but you were also encrypted. Not by charms or magic, but by heavenly protection. They made another attempt, calling up all of their power, while chanting incantations. The rapid surge backfired at that moment. Where they sat, the energy they released retreated and snapped like an electric wire. The agony was splitting, acute and immediate. As their gift, once a second skin, started to wane, they gripped their heads tightly. The spirits they invoked became quiet, and the sights they evoked turned to static. They had never lost their talent before, so panic struck. However, you weren't intended to be read. Certain facts cannot be seen by the naked eye and cannot be revealed by vision, ritual, or clairvoyant. You have a higher, untouchable presence as you walk. Since they were just removed from the game, the psychic who attempted to read you is also aware of this. They believed they understood you. The first psychic they sent was an experienced, well-recommended, and infallible kind. Despite being warned about you, they choose not to take it seriously. They believed that everyone had a vulnerability. They reached for you after sitting down and closing their eyes. Immediately, their confidence broke. Rather than murmurs or images, they struck a wall, thick, still, living. They made another attempt, pressing harder. But your enthusiasm was unquestionable. They didn't see the pictures they were expecting, your history, your future, your spirit. Instead, they experienced dense, heavy static that suffocated their minds like fog. It grew worse the harder they pushed. Their chest constricted, and their breathing became shallow as a headache struck their skull. It was like trying to grip water with bare hands. When they attempted to draw something, anything, from your vitality. Every thread vanished, every detail slid away. Shaking and confused, they opened their eyes. They had nothing to report for the first time in their careers, and they were afraid of the stillness. They ought to have halted, yet they continued. The first psychic's failure ought to have served as a warning. But the one who was fixated on you wouldn't give up. Someone who felt entitled to know what wasn't theirs, a resentful adversary, or as a jealous rival. They took things a step further and hired a well-known psychic, a titan of the industry. Before they started, you sensed a little change, a ripple in the atmosphere. They sat in a silent room with incense burning and candles flickering. They reached out while closing their eyes. Nothing. They made another attempt, pushing their awareness harder and further. Then there was darkness, a pervasive emptiness rather than the typical nothingness. Panic struck. Their hearts thumping, they opened their eyes. They made an effort to concentrate themselves and reach for their typical presence, but to no avail. Their talent, which they had been using with ease for years, was taken away from them. For weeks, not for hours or minutes. No ability, No understanding, no connection. They were unable to hear the whispers of the invisible and read people. Silence fell between them. The person who hired them became agitated and demanded results, but the psychic was unable to provide any. It was retribution for intruding into your energy, not merely a poor reading. You and I both knew that this was no longer about business, despite what they convinced themselves. It was intimate. They wanted to own the recipe for your success, not simply rid you. They were curious as to why doors that never opened for them opened for you. They weren't believers at first. They scoffed at the notion of energy, psychics, or anything that was not quantifiable. They didn't understand you. They had maneuvered, strategized, played by the rules, and adhered to formulae. Yet you continued to win while they suffered. Thus, they violated their own regulations. 5 psychics became 10, and then 5. Some of them declined to attempt after hearing your name, whereas the first few told them nothing. Others spoke of an unknown power as they returned shaken. However, they refused to give up because, deep down, this was always about you and never about moving on. The way you achieved without selling your soul. The way you ascended without their deception. There was no curtain, yet they wanted to look beyond it. Something out of their grasp shielded you. They lost another aspect of themselves each time they attempted to lift the curtain. They became less self-assured and less grounded in reality. They invested much on readings in the hopes of receiving a response that would never materialize. As they descended more into obsession, you were completely unaware of their existence. Undisturbed, unconcerned, and unstoppable, you kept rising. They were most harmed by it. The murmurs were there, but you couldn't hear them. "Stay away from that one," was the warning that spread your name, not awe or jealousy. It started off as only one psychic, the first to go, their talent now untrustworthy. It was a poor day, they told themselves, a fluke. However, their insights were scattered, and their perceptions were warped when they attempted to read someone else. One psychic then attempted, and then another, and yet another. Before they weren't, they all believed they would be different, stronger, wiser, and untouchable. The first symptoms were mild, such as a persistent headache and an unexpected surge of fatigue. They believed they just needed to ground themselves, so they persisted. However, it grew worse the more they dug into you. Their frequent clientele grumbled about their decreased precision. Some completely lost their skills. Then, a darker thing started to happen. They began to feel like something they couldn't identify was watching them, not you. The hungry ones rushed ahead, believing they would be the ones to break through, while the careless ones disregarded the warning signals. They stopped themselves, so you didn't have to stop them. Some completely quit their jobs and vanished silently. Others were turned into cautionary tales, spoken in whispers to those who were still gifted. They didn't know what protected you. They just knew it didn't play tricks. You can try, they warned, but you won't like what happens. You continued to go unaffected, oblivious to the horror following you. Those who ought to have known better had to learn their lesson the hard way. They believed they could learn things from you, see beyond the curtain, and gather secrets that they never had. However, trespassing is not tolerated in the invisible realm. You were guarded, not simply protected. They sensed it the instant they attempted to read you, a force that resisted. Some were rash and conceited. They pushed harder, attempting to get in. At that moment, it occurred. The first wave was mild, causing a ringing in their ears and pressure in their head. Their hands trembled and their breath became shallow. It's okay, they persuaded themselves. They just need to concentrate and center themselves. Then the nausea came on, strong and unrelenting. They tried to return by closing their eyes, but they were no longer alone. In the shadows something moved, observing, waiting. They saw something they weren't supposed to see, and it brought them back. But they didn't see your past or future. Some psychics lost their abilities right away. Their intuition disappeared, and their visions darkened. Where their powers previously flourished, all that remained was stillness. Others received various markings. The people who sought to push their way in and were the bravest paid the heaviest price. Now they noticed objects that weren't part of this reality. They heard murmurs in languages they didn't understand and saw shadowy forms in the corners of their rooms. Their dreams had been hijacked by images of something big, something old, something that told them not to go back. I tried reading someone I shouldn't have, and now I see nothing but darkness, a psychic once said, her voice trembling. I should have paid attention. You didn't even need to be aware. You didn't need to do anything. Those who violated your rights were dealt with appropriately. Unauthorized reading of a selected text is a spiritual offense that carries a lifelong penalty. Although most individuals aren't prepared for it, it's said that the truth will set you free. The complete cosmic transmission, no sugarcoating, no illusions, simply unadulterated, unfiltered awakening, is what the chosen ones are looking for. Imagine having over 450 selected people participate in weekly group calls that are recorded for you to access at any time. Not only is our private Discord lively, but it's also quite active. Innovations occur when ideas are generated. That selected energy cannot be stopped. Enter Chosen Singles, where soul connections are inscribed in the stars rather than in stale pickup lines. For those looking for something more profound. Unlock modern manifestation mechanics. Our special grimoire with 3 potent chapters accessible to members. If you're looking to learn more, use magic to achieve your objectives more quickly. Turn your area into a magnet for wealth, and use spellcraft to bring your dreams to life. Get access to unedited interviews with actual targeted people, as well as video specials that are so unvarnished that the YouTube tycoons would like you not to see them. This is a movement, not simply a membership. The ascension is now. The road is now. The description contains the URL. Instead of seeing you as they had hoped, they saw themselves. With poise and assurance, the psychic took a seat and prepared to take what wasn't theirs, expecting the typical, a thread to follow, a peek into your history, a clue of what's to come. They reached out for your energy. However, something changed the instant they tried to latch onto you. Rejecting their entrance, the energy bent and twisted. At first, they were unaware of what was going on, but then the vision started. But they weren't yours. They saw a deformed, distorted, and naked mirror of themselves. Their own anxieties, the crimes they denied, and the uncertainties they hid, fought to the surface. Every secret deception, flaw, and unsaid reality they had avoided throughout their lives surfaced. They made an attempt to retreat, but it was too late. They unraveled more the deeper they pushed. They no longer felt confident in their power, which seemed alien. They wondered who had given them this present. In reality, who had they been serving? And why did they feel so insignificant when they attempted to read you? A few never made it back. If they could still call themselves a human, they were a changed person when they left the session. Instead of finding your secrets, they ended up destroying themselves. With a little leverage, a little information, and a peek of what makes you untouchable, they believed they were playing it smart. One psychic at first, then 5, then 10. However, they never received a response, regardless of how many people they employed or how much they spent. Their infatuation never even occurred to you. You continued to move, unconcerned, unstoppable, winning with little effort, while they continued to spiral deeper. Their first error was assuming that you could be decoded. Their second error was assuming that spiritual knowledge was free. Though passion is costly, they began with money. Their professional psychics only provided them with jumbled responses and warped images. They made rash choices, desperate relationships, blind investments, because they lacked a clear path. Decisions based on fear rather than strategy. And the quickest path to self-destruction is fear. Their reputation dissolved, and their company collapsed. Their former admirers saw them fall apart. You were creating civilizations while others were chasing ghosts. They haven't gained anything. They attempted to break your code, yet they were the only thing that was flawed. Some people are too stupid to give up. Certain psychics are aware of what they have touched and do not choose to participate. The first effort was sufficient. They expected to see, read, or extract as they reached for you, but instead, they received a warning, a presence they couldn't describe, a power they couldn't identify. A weight crushing on their souls told some to back off before it was too late, and they felt it in their bones. Some lost something, a little of their skills, a bit of their mental stability. Some never mentioned it again. You didn't even recognize their existence. Much alone urged them to quit. But something did. Those with genuine talent pay attention. They decline the money. They decline the next request. When they realize that dabbling in affairs of God comes with a cost they cannot afford, some even quit the profession completely. Some people change their priorities, shifting toward faith, healing, or something bigger than themselves. Then there are those who vanish entirely. No more customers, no more readings, no more signs of their former selves, because they will never forget what they saw when they peered into you. They believed no one would notice and that they were untouchable. However, people were constantly noticing. The murmurs were faint at first. Investors paused before making transactions. Co-workers looked at each other. When their names were called out, employees whispered. They shrugged it aside, ignored it. They were still in charge after all, weren't they? Before they did, you sensed the change. You were aware that desperate movements left a fragrance. Theirs smelled like defeat. They had invested much on readings that yielded no results. Their once secret weapon, psychics, ultimately proved to be their undoing. Poor investments, irrational choices, and an increasing reputation for being lost, unstable, and unpredictable. They lost the faith of the same people they used to rule. Weakness is not respected in the corporate world, and the quickest way to lose influence is to get obsessed. They tried to solve your riddle for months, or even years, to figure out why you continued winning, to find out what made you unique. They also exposed themselves in the process. They believed that they were teasing you. They were unaware that nobody else was playing. You never gave them a second thought, even though they were completely enamored with you, your name, your energy, your movements. Because you don't run after things, plot, or seem frightened. You are still ascending while others are collapsing because of this. Behind closed doors, their name is a joke, their empire is crumbling, and their power has vanished. Their goal was to take control of you and own something that was never theirs. However, they ultimately lost self-control. You didn't have to do anything at all. For as long as they could, they battled it. They spent a lot of money, time, and effort trying desperately to figure you out. They didn't think you were really untouchable. The truth, however, doesn't care who accepts it. You cannot be read. They never intended to comprehend you. They first believed that it just required selecting the appropriate psychic, the appropriate method, and the appropriate time. The greatest of the best, spiritualists, mystics, occultists, witches, and seers, were among them. Some were brought in from all across the globe, their reputations flawless. Others were handpicked from underground circles where secrets are money. Each and every one of them not only failed, but also suffered the price. Some went insane, while others lost their powers. They lost themselves in the process, as did the person who initiated it all. The figure in the mirror was no longer someone they recognized. The self-assured, strategic person who had thought they were in charge of everything was gone, replaced with a tormented person, haunted by the visions that turned into nightmares when they dug too deep, by the stillness they discovered in place of answers. They are finally compelled to acknowledge what ought to have been obvious from the beginning. You are not for them to read, understand, or solve. No human hand, psychic, seer, or desperate adversary can hold what God has written on your path. That's your best defense, and their last blow. Every tool, every ritual, every last-ditch effort to decipher you, they tried it all. However, decoding you was never intended. Just your presence distorts their senses, warps their view, and causes them to lose sight of what they came to see. Not because you're concealing, but rather because they weren't intended to know who you are. They cannot get around your protection, since it is a rule of existence that is integrated into your very nature. They will continue to lose regardless of how much they spend, how hard they work, or how far they go, and their anxiety will increase with every setback. Because they become more and more unraveled the more they pursue you. You continue to rise and go onward, unaffected, unhindered, and untouchable. As they were never intended to comprehend you, however, you were already aware of that. Tell us about your experience. Have they dispatched individuals to observe you, research you, and take things they can't have? Inform them that they will never be able to match your might.